You're listening to Murder Not Murdering with Aaron,
And Autumn,
a true crime podcast about murder and murdering.
but we are not murderers.
All right, everybody, we are back at Murder Not Murdering with Aaron and
Autumn.
what's up, y'all? Let's talk about murders.
We love murder.
No, not murder. Murdering. JK. That's our whole thing. We don't do the murdering.
MG.
Although you should have heard the spicy conversation we were having right before this, so it might change your mind.
True story.
Just FYI, customer service is a lot of testing patience. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Statement.
Mhm. And anybody that works in customer service would absolutely understand that statement.
Absolutely would.
Yeah. Autumn, you sent me a TikTok the other day that has a interesting update. Do you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I don't
it
really
wasn't
know.
really an.
Yeah, it's not really an update.
There's
per
movement.
se. I know, but at the same time, I mean, so it's the Kristen Smart case. They have subpoenaed the home of his mother, the man who has been convicted. No, he's got convicted of her murder, but they've never found her body.
Mhm.
And they have subpoenaed his mother's home for a search warrant. So to go inside and outside, and they've been digging for 2 days. I am curious what new evidence was presented for them to be able to go there and suspect that.
Well, here's the thing. They have to have enough evidence to warrant giving them a search warrant. So they have to have something new to suspect that she might be buried there or her body is somewhere in the, vicinity of the home. Or inside the home, like in the basement or something. People have done that a million times, cover it up with concrete or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, when you sent that to me, it had pictures of them like digging things up and searching the house and all of that. So, it means that there's some movement, right? Whether we know if it's lateral movement or not, we don't know. But we will keep you posted.
Sad. And the guy just won't. He just keeps saying he's innocent, and that's why he's not giving up her location.
That
Bro,
just
you've been
drives me.
convicted.
Yeah. It drives me crazy too when someone is the killer, or maybe even they've confessed or they've been DNA tested or something, and they still won't give that piece to the family. It just proves what monsters some people can be. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. It's just heartbreaking. Let her
Mhm.
family bring her home.
For real. And if we do get more information on this, we will keep posting and letting you know and updating you on what we see as well. Because we know that if you listen to our podcast, most likely you've been following this story.
And if our posts go missing on Instagram, that's because all of a sudden they're taking down posts from our website.
Yeah. So if any of our listeners work for Instagram, DM us.
DM us.
Either somebody has been flagging us and flagging our posts. None of our posts are inappropriate. They always adhere to the guidelines.
Mhm.
It did say we had one post that was talking about Ted Bundy, and they took that post down, I think, because it was a person who did harm in their explanation. But that's ridiculous because we're not promoting a person that did harm.
No.
It's very odd.
They took down a post about just a bunch of things. So they took down like 4 or 5 of our posts. I was like, okay, that's really interesting.
Yeah. So
Because
either somebody's out there reporting us, which can happen, or this is like a new thing in their algorithm, which I wouldn't be surprised because we all know Meta sucks. But it is also part of, having a podcast. we've got to get the word out there to you all. And that seems to be the main platform that we can do that on. So if you're following us at Murder Not Murdering on Instagram, like our posts because we
Mhm.
don't know how long they'll be up for, I guess.
Right? Like, if they start disappearing, it's not us. It's
It's
not.
not us.
I've appealed them, and two of them have been brought back, and I'm waiting on word on the other one. So we'll
Yeah,
see.
we'll see. But anyway, that's our Instagram page. We post on there often about any of our cases that we have done lately. Another thing that I was going to tell you is a friend of mine who listens to this podcast, I ran into at my Pilates class, and she had mentioned that she was just listening to our podcast. And one funny thing is, she is the person that referred me to the Jake Bird Hex episode.
Oh, that was so long
It was
ago.
so long ago, and it's super interesting, and, she actually sent me a picture of the actual house that still exists now where the murder took place.
Oh,
So, yeah. So if you want to go back in the archives, I recommend listening to that one because it is local and it is interesting and it's a horrific, brutal axe murder. So if you feel into that, if that's your
if
bag,
that's your jam.
then listen back to that case. It was just by chance that we ran into each other, so I thought I'd bring it up on the podcast, and, yeah, check that one out. Um, I am doing a case this week that's pretty intense, and it's a little bit long because there's a lot of information, so I think I'm just gonna jump right in if you're good with that.
Yep, go for it.
Okay, this is The Butcher Baker, Anchorage, Alaska. In summer, daylight lingers so long it can start to feel unnatural. Midnight glows dim and blue instead of black. The mountains stand silent against the horizon, and beyond the city limits stretches hundreds of miles of wilderness, forests, rivers, bogs, frozen valleys, vast enough to swallow people whole. In the late 70s and early 80s, women began disappearing. Some vanished from downtown Anchorage. Some were last seen getting into cars with strangers. Some were dancers. Some were sex workers. Some were teenagers just trying to survive. One by one, they disappeared into the Alaskan dark. At first, the disappearances did not seem connected. Then, hunters started finding bodies, a shallow grave near Knik River, human remains scattered in remote terrain, women dumped so far into the wilderness it took years to find them, if they were found at all. Police realized that they were hunting someone methodical, someone patient, someone who understood Alaska better than almost anyone else. This killer knew how to track his prey, how to move through the wilderness unnoticed, how to make people vanish. And all the while, this man lived quietly in Anchorage. He owned a bakery, he had a wife, children, neighbors trusted him. Customers shook his hand every morning. His name was Robert Hansen, and investigators would eventually uncover one of the most horrifying serial murder cases in American history. But for years, no one knew exactly what was happening to the women who disappeared into the Alaskan wilderness. Tonight, we're going to talk about the victims, the investigation, and the failures that allowed the murders to continue, and the terrifying chain of events that finally exposed a killer hiding in plain sight. Robert Christian Hansen was born February 15th, 1939, in Esterville, Iowa. By nearly every account, he had a miserable childhood. He suffered from acne that scarred his face permanently. He had a pronounced stutter. He was painfully shy, and other kids mocked him relentlessly. Teachers described him as isolated and awkward, and according to later reports, Hansen carried those humiliations with him for the rest of his life. His father, a Danish immigrant, ran a bakery and reportedly ruled the household with strict discipline. Robert spent much of his youth working there. But there was one thing that made him feel powerful: hunting, in the woods. He was no longer the awkward boy with a stutter. He was in control. He became obsessed with tracking animals, rifles, wilderness survival, and stalking prey. These themes would later become horrifyingly important. In 1960, Hansen committed his first major crime. He burned down a school bus garage in Iowa. Authorities believed it to be revenge against the people that he blamed for humiliating him in high school. He served about 20 months in prison, and during that incarceration, psychiatric evaluations reportedly described him as emotionally immature and consumed with resentment towards people who had wronged him. He also had schizophrenic tendencies and manic depression. After his release, Hansen married and eventually moved to Anchorage, Alaska in 1967. On the surface, he became exactly the kind of man no one suspects: the local baker. Neighbors liked him. He won hunting competitions. He set records with a bow. He had children. Customers knew him as a hardworking, seemingly normal guy. But behind closed doors, the violence was escalating. In 1971, Hansen was arrested twice. First for abducting and attempting to rape a housewife. Now, her name was not released. Then he was again arrested for raping a sex worker. And this is where the story becomes deeply frustrating. The second charge was dropped during a plea deal, leading him to serve only 6 months of a 5-year sentence. He was also arrested for larceny after trying to steal a chainsaw, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison but released for time served only 2 years later. Authorities, after the fact, realized that if Hansen had served the full time available to him for some of his earlier crimes, several women would still be alive. We know for a fact that at least 3 of his 4 convicted murders took place during the time that he would have been in prison had he served the full 5 years.
That's frustrating.
Yes. So back to where we are. Women are disappearing. One of the earliest suspect victims was 18-year-old Celia Van Zetten. She vanished in December 1971. Her body was later discovered in a remote area after she apparently escaped into the wilderness and froze to death. Hansen denied killing her, but investigators long suspected that he was responsible. And the disappearances continued. Young women, often vulnerable women, women who law enforcement at the time unfortunately categorized as disposable. Some were dancers at strip clubs. Some exchanged sex for money. Some were transients. Some were struggling with addiction. And because of that, their disappearances did not receive the urgency that they deserved. That failure is important to note because predators notice who society ignores, and Robert Hansen had found his ideal prey. Over time, investigators started piecing together Hansen's methods, and it was the stuff of nightmares. Everything we've been warned about now. He would approach women around Anchorage, often offering money in exchange for sex acts or to spend time with him. He was pretending to be harmless. Many women later said that Hansen did not seem intimidating at first glance. He was short, soft-spoken, awkward, and unimposing. But that appearance was camouflage. Once he isolated a victim, he would pull a gun on them. And Hansen himself chillingly said, and excuse the poor grammar, it was his, not mine. I says, if you do exactly what I tell you and don't give me any problem whatsoever, there's going to be no, you won't get hurt in any way, shape, or form. Hansen told troopers, according to news accounts at the time. He was a monster trying to set them at ease. Then he often drove the women to his home where he would rape and torture them. And this is the part that became infamous. He would then transport victims to the Alaskan wilderness using his small plane. Some investigators believed that Hansen viewed these women as actual prey. He hunted moose, he hunted bears, and eventually he hunted women. Bodies later recovered in remote areas show gunshot wounds, shallow graves, and signs of terror. Many victims were found near the Kanik River area and surrounding wilderness. Some of these victims were never recovered at all. Authorities would later say that Hansen admitted to at least 17 murders, though investigators suspect the real number may have been much higher. And all the while, he kept baking bread every morning, playing husband and father, and being part of a community.
Just so disturbing.
It is. And here's where the story begins to turn. And this bastard is going to make a mistake. It's June 13th, 1983. 17-year-old Cindy Paulson was in Anchorage when Robert Hansen approached her. He offered her money for oral sex, $200. She got into the car. And almost immediately, Hansen pulled a gun on her. Cindy later described trying to resist. She said, "He had handcuffed one of my hands, and I was trying to get loose. But he pulled out a gun, and then he got my other hand cuffed. I don't know how he did it. It was frightening. Because I fought, but not a lot, because I knew he would do something." She knew he wanted to hurt her, and hurt her badly. He drove her to his house in Anchorage. Inside, he raped her. He sexually assaulted and tortured her for hours. He also put a chain around her neck and fastened it to a post in his basement. Having spent hours and hours trapped in the serial killer's home, Cindy was so smart because she took note of every detail that she could remember, including the bars that were on the windows, bullet holes she saw in the floor. And she said, "Then about 5 hours later, he woke up and came over. And I told him all I want to do is go home because I live with my mom and I won't tell nobody." She said this to Sergeant Glenn Floth, the Alaska State Trooper leading the investigation. Cindy is a teenager in a stranger's house, chained by her neck in a basement and handcuffed, knowing no one knows where she is. At one point, Hansen reportedly fell asleep on a nearby couch, and Cindy understood something horrifying. He was not done with her yet. This was only the beginning. Later, before dawn, Hansen loaded Cindy into his car again. He said that he had a plane over at Merrill Airfield and that we would go there. He would take me to his cabin and bring me back. And I knew I wasn't going to come back. After some hours in the home, Hansen did show Cindy his large collection of hunting trophies. He originally told her that his name was Don, but she could easily read his name listed on these awards. She said this was the moment she realized he was going to kill her because now she knew his true identity, and her only option would be to attempt an escape. They left around 5 a.m. Her wrists were handcuffed in front of her body. He drove towards the airport. There sat his small Piper Super Cub plane. Hansen parked, got out of the car, and told the still handcuffed Cindy Paulson not to move, or else he was going to kill her. After Hansen left the car to fuel and load his plane, Cindy threw her body into the driver's seat and managed to open the door. Wearing no shoes and still handcuffed, the teens sprinted for the nearest street. Hansen turned around just in time to see her escaping. He ran after her, yelling at her to return, but Cindy just kept running. She knew her life depended on it, and she successfully ran onto 6th Avenue. Luckily, a truck just happened to be coming by and saw her in distress. She asked the driver, named Robert Yount, to take her to a nearby motel where her boyfriend was staying. And thank God he stopped, because his decision not to just pass by or not to get involved changed the course of this entire case. Like I said, Cindy was smart, remembering all the details. And she later told police that she left her blue sneakers on the passenger floor door of the back seat so that there would be evidence that she had been inside the car. I mean, that's some good thinking.
Yeah, that is.
Still at the airfield, Robert Hansen made his way back to the car and quickly sped off. However, an observant security guard took notice of his strange behavior and wrote down his license plate and car model. Back at the motel, Cindy, still in handcuffs, got a hold of her boyfriend over the phone at the front desk. Soon after, a motel employee called the Anchorage Police Department. Investigators later concluded that Hansen frequently flew victims to isolated wilderness areas before murdering them. And suddenly, for the first time in years, investigators had something concrete: a witness, a survivor, a name. When police interviewed Cindy, she provided a highly detailed account of her horrific ordeal, including information about Hansen's car, the interior of his home, the street that his property was on, and even details about the gun that the serial killer threatened her with. Less than an hour later, after Cindy escaped him, the teenager was in a police car headed for the hospital, standard protocol for a victim of sexual assault. While en route to the hospital, they drove past the same airfield she had just run away from. She remembered which area of the airport she had been taken to and what Hansen's plane looked like. So Cindy Paulson then asked the officer to stop so she could lead him precisely to where Robert Hansen's blue and white plane was still parked. Noticing the scene taking place, that same security guard who wrote down Hansen's license plate flagged down the officers and shared his information. With the details about Hansen's car and the plane's registration, Anchorage police contacted the Federal Aviation Administration for final confirmation. As officers pulled into the hospital with Cindy, they received a call that the registration for both the car and plane matched Anchorage local Robert C. Hansen. Even after Cindy had identified him, investigators initially struggled. Hansen, when questioned by investigators, denied Cindy's accusation, because of course he did,
Mhm.
stating that she was just trying to cause trouble for him because he refused to pay her extortion demands. This excuse apparently had been something that he has used on several occasions when he had prior run ins with the law. Hansen's meek demeanor and humble occupation as a baker, along with an alibi from his friend John Henning, persuaded police not to consider him a serious suspect. Because Robert Hansen did not fit their mental image of a serial killer, he was married, he owned a business, he had no outward appearance of being a monster. Some officers doubted Cindy because she was a teenage sex worker. And this part of the story is deeply important. Had police completely dismissed her, as they often did to marginalized women during that era, he may have continued killing for years. But one investigator began seeing the larger picture. Detective Glenn Floth worked with the FBI profiler, famous, by the way, John Douglas, who you might recognize that name. He was one of the early criminal profilers later associated with the Behavioral Science Unit. Douglas reportedly developed a profile describing him as a socially awkward hunter with low self-esteem who would target sex workers and flew victims into the wilderness. This matched Hansen perfectly. It had been 4 months or so after Cindy's assault and kidnapping when Robert Hansen was finally arrested for his 12-year-long serial killing spree. Police obtained search warrants, and what they found inside Hansen's home was devastating. Jewelry belonging to victims, many weapons, and perhaps most chilling of all, an aeronautical chart covered in little X marks. It was hidden behind Hanson's headboard. Many of these little marks matched sites where bodies had been found. When investigators told Hansen that they had seized his map marked with 17 locations and spots that they believed indicated the locations of bodies, Frank Rothschild, the prosecuting attorney, said, "He was mild-mannered Bob the Baker. And as I'm looking at him, all of a sudden, he transformed. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. His neck got red, and he was pissed. I can still see him when he got livid like that." Hansen then asked to speak to his attorneys and went into another room. But Rothschild recalled you could hear him screaming at his lawyers. He didn't see his victims as human. In his mind, there were good girls and there were bad girls. Initially, Hansen denied everything, but eventually confronted with the stacks of evidence and testimony, he began talking. As part of a plea deal, which makes me so mad, but I understand why they have to do it. As part of a plea deal, Hansen confessed to multiple murders and guided investigators to burial locations. He admitted to a spree of attacks against women starting in 1971. He ultimately admitted to 17 killings. His earliest victims were girls or young women, usually between the ages of 16 and 19 years old. The full range, though, was 16 to 41 years old. Although, based on evidence, law enforcement suspect that Robert Hansen killed at least 21 female victims. The following is a list of confirmed victims and several other additional women who have been mentioned as possible victims. Of these 18 women, Hansen was only formally charged with the murders of 4 of them: Sherry Morrow, Joanna Messina, Eklutna Annie, and Paula Goulding. He was also charged with the abduction and rape of Cindy Paulson. So it's those 4 women, the attempt on Cindy Paulson, Teresa Watson, Angela Feddern, Tammy Peterson, Sue Luna, Malai Larson, Lisa Futrell, Robin Pelkey, and she was an important one because she was known as Horseshoe Harriet before she was found through DNA. Delynn Sugar Frey, Andrea Altieri, Roxanne Eastland, Mary Thill, Megan Emmerich, Celia Van Zetten, and that is just the beginning of the list. Those are the ones that they were fairly certain they could prove. Some of the bodies were recovered and others were never found. Some families never even knew what happened to their daughters until years later. And perhaps the most heartbreaking reality of all of this is that several victims were never reported missing. That is how isolated and vulnerable many of these women were. There's always a danger in serial killer stories that the murderer becomes the center of gravity. But Robert Hansen's victims were not props in his narrative. They were women trying to survive, and many of them failed repeatedly by systems that deemed them less worthy of protection. And that pattern we see again and again in serial murder cases. Victims living on society's margins disappear, and people shrug, police delay, and predators continue. The Hansen case is one of the most clearest examples of that, because for years, bodies were literally being found in the wilderness while women from Anchorage streets just kept vanishing one after another, and still, the alarm bells didn't fully ring until Cindy escaped him. In 1984, Robert Hansen pleaded guilty to the 4 murders along with the kidnapping and rape of Cindy Paulson. He received 461 years in prison without the chance of parole. He spent the remainder of his life incarcerated in Alaska. Following his capture, Hansen's second wife and 2 children left Anchorage permanently and moved to Arkansas. The children's names have never been publicized and they live in anonymity, and good for them. Hansen served time briefly at Lemon Creek Correctional Center in Juneau until authorities found escape plans stashed among his belongings.
Nice.
Literally the makings of a bomb and like tons of escape routes. It was extensive. So they sent him to Seward. Officials said at the time that he had spent many of his final years of his life working as a jailhouse barber. And in 2014, Hansen died in prison at the age of 75. One Alaska State Trooper reportedly said afterward that the world was better without him. And I'd have to agree. But the final word in this story belongs to Cindy Paulson, because survivor stories matter, especially in true crime when we don't get them very often. Cindy was 17 years old, handcuffed, terrified, barefoot, and she still found the will to run. Her testimony shattered the illusion surrounding Robert Hansen, and without her, investigators may have never connected the disappearances. Without her, more women most certainly would have died. And because she survived, families got answers. Cindy's story was so powerful that it became the centerpiece for a star-studded movie in 2013 called The Frozen Ground, starring Vanessa Hudgens, John Cusack, and Nicolas Cage. Despite her troubled beginnings, Cindy's bravery turned her into a pivotal figure in one of Alaska's darkest criminal cases. Her story has since been told through documentaries, books, and film. Today, many who search Cindy Paulson, Alaska, and what happened to Cindy Paulson only find her resilience. She remains an enduring reminder of strength in the face of unimaginable danger. Frank Rothschild, the assistant district attorney who tried Hansen's case, said, "I would have wished every breath he took had an element of pain to it. But here's how I thought about it. Here's a guy whose passion in life was going out into the wilderness and hunting, the great Alaska wild. Instead of being able to do that, he was put in a cell with no view of anything. Forget the mountains, with rancid air and horrific people around him. That, to me, is the supreme punishment. He will not be missed. Good riddance to him." My sources were Wikipedia, Robert Hansen, Blurred Bylines, How Cindy Paulson Escaped Serial Killer Robert Hansen, People Magazine, How Serial Killer Robert Hansen Was Caught, Anchorage Daily News, Serial Killer Hansen Dead, World Better Without Him. Agreed. Digital Press, Cindy Paulson and Robert Hansen, Mindhunter by John Douglas, the famous FBI guy who started the behavioral unit, Alaska Bureau of Investigation cold case releases, and that's it. That's my list.
That's a terrifying story.
It's an awful one, and it's a serial killer, you know? I haven't done one
being
of those.
hunted, that alone is
No, what they think is that he would take them up there after they were, horribly, mistreated, and then would set them free in the woods and hunt them down.
So crazy. It's
And that
so
one
crazy.
girl escaped him, but she froze to death because it was too cold out. I mean, just awful. And thank God for Cindy, and that she went to the authorities and told them what happened. It sucks that they didn't fully believe her in the beginning, but eventually there was some level of justice.
Some level, yes.
He was a monster.
A fucking understatement.
The fact that this man looked at people every day in the eye, baking his bread, playing with his children. I mean, it's disgusting. All the meanwhile,
1000%.
he raped and tortured at least 17 women, which he confessed to, but they know it's far more than that.
So
That was a little departure from what I usually do, but
yeah.
I think it's an important case, and I think it's important to make sure that we say the names of the victims, and hopefully that means that people understand that there's only so long that you can get away with shit, especially now that we have DNA and all of the rest of it, because technology will fucking catch you.
I hope it catches all these old crotchety men who thought that they would be getting away with crimes for the rest of their lives.
For real. And the thing that makes me frustrated too is that because of the remote locations of where the bodies were left or hunted or dropped, we will never find those bodies, whether it's been decay or, animals were out there and all of that, or just so remote that you couldn't find them. It's just really unfortunate there are still people out there that don't have a definitive answer, and that's really sad.
I agree.
But again, some of the people weren't even listed as missing because they lived lifestyles that, the cops deemed as not worthy of paying attention to.
So fucked up.
Yeah. Anyway, Autumn, what's your case this week?
Wouldn't you like to know?
A real pick me up.
No, not at all, actually. Never
didn't
is
think
over
so.
here on this side. But this one is the girl who never made it to the store. It's going to make you really sad.
Yeah.
But hopefully something comes of it. So let's get into it here.
I'm ready.
It was supposed to be a normal Tuesday night. The kind of winter night that settles over a neighborhood. Porch lights glowing against damp pavement, televisions humming through thin walls, parents trying to keep children occupied while dinner dishes sit in sinks and people move through routines they've repeated 1,000 times before. In the east side of Kennewick, Washington, 4-year-old Sofia Juarez was excited for the next day because February 5th, 2003 was her birthday. She was about to turn 5 years old. And somewhere inside that little house on East 15th Avenue, Sofia probably had all the kinds of thoughts children have the night before a birthday. Maybe she wondered what presents she might get. Maybe she was thinking about her cake or candles or seeing family members. Maybe she simply felt that restless excitement that makes it hard for children to sit still when something special is coming. But Sofia Juarez never made it to her 5th birthday. Instead, she vanished into the cold February darkness only blocks from home. And more than 2 decades later, nobody knows exactly what happened to her. This is one of the most haunting missing child cases in Washington state history. And even now, after thousands of tips, hundreds of searches, national media attention, and a case file more than 20,000 pages long, Sofia's story remains unfinished. Sofia Juarez was born on February 5th, 1998. She lived with a large extended family on the 100 block of East 15th Avenue in Kennewick. The home was crowded and busy, filled with relatives, children, conversations, movement, and constant activity. Sofia lived there with her mother, Maria Juarez, her grandmother, Ignacia Prado Juarez, her grandmother's boyfriend, Jose Lopez Torres, and several aunts and uncles. The family had roots in Mexico, and Spanish was commonly spoken in the home. At the time Sofia disappeared, her mother, Maria, was only 20 years old herself. Sofia's biological father, Andre Gutierrez Abrahan, was not involved in her life. Reports say he denied paternity and had no relationship with Sofia or the family. Investigators would later look closely at him, like they did everyone connected to Sofia. But he was quickly ruled out after providing a verified alibi. And when people described Sofia, they described a little girl who stood out immediately. She had dark hair and brown eyes. She had pierced ears, and small gold hoop earrings she liked to wear. She had a mole beneath one eye and a birthmark on her lower back. She was missing her 4 upper front teeth, the kind of detail that instantly makes you picture a child smiling. At 4 years old, she stood about 3 feet tall and weighed only 33 pounds. She was tiny. So tiny that when you imagine her walking alone at night through a dark neighborhood in February, it immediately brings chills. And maybe that's part of why this case hit the community as hard as it did. Because almost immediately, investigators believed this was not a child who had simply wandered off. Something about the circumstances felt deeply alarming from the very beginning. February 4th, 2003, Tuesday night, just after 8 p.m. The weather outside hovered around 36 degrees. Cold enough that adults wore jackets. Cold enough that your breath would fog in the air. Inside the Juarez home, Sofia was playing with some of her younger uncles while adults moved in and out of rooms nearby. Jose Lopez Torres, the boyfriend of Sofia's grandmother, was preparing to walk to a nearby convenience store. Before leaving, he casually asked the children if they wanted to come with him. Nobody seemed interested, at least at first. Torres eventually left the house alone. But, according to investigators, Sofia changed her mind at the last second. And this tiny detail, this one tiny miscommunication, would become the center point of the entire case. Because Torres apparently never realized Sofia intended to follow him. Around the same time, Sofia reportedly asked her mother for $1 to spend at the store. Maria Juarez later said she watched Sofia leave the room and heard the front door close. That moment, hearing the door shut, became the last confirmed moment anyone knows for certain that Sofia was alive.
That just breaks my heart. Every
It's-
detail of this is killing me. Just the
It's-
thought of her and so young, and it's awful.
That's her freaking birthday the next day. She stepped out into the February night wearing a red long-sleeve shirt, blue overalls, violet socks, white Converse sneakers, and gold hoop earrings. No coat, no gloves, nothing heavy enough for the weather. She thought she was just heading to the store. And the store was only a few blocks away. But Sofia never arrived there. This is a part of the case that feels especially haunting because the distance was so short. If you look at maps of the neighborhood today, you realize how close everything was. Sofia should have reached the convenience store quickly. It wasn't some isolated highway stop or a rural location miles away. It was a neighborhood route, a child trying to catch up to someone she knew. Meanwhile, Jose Lopez Torres reached the store and carried on normally. Surveillance footage later confirmed his timeline. He bought milk. He used a payphone to call relatives in Mexico. Then he headed home. At approximately 9:45 p.m., he returned to the house. And that's when the horrifying misunderstanding became clear. Sofia had left to follow him, but he had never seen her. Maria and Jose immediately began searching for the child. Then, at 9:53 p.m., police were called. And from the moment officers arrived, the atmosphere surrounding the case was different. Police reached the house within minutes. And almost immediately, investigators began noticing things that made this case feel more serious than a simple missing child report. It was nighttime. The temperature was near freezing. Sofia was only 4 years old. And despite rapid searches of the immediate area, there was no sign of her. No crying child hiding nearby, no footprints, no indication she had wandered into a neighbor's yard or gotten lost. The response escalated incredibly fast. Within an hour, the FBI had been contacted. Washington State issued its very first Amber Alert for Sofia Juarez.
No way.
This was the first Amber Alert ever issued in Washington State. That alone tells you how alarming authorities considered the situation from the very beginning. Search teams flooded the area. Police officers and volunteers searched parks, playgrounds, fields, vacant lots, schools, yards, garbage containers, drainage areas, and nearby businesses. Night vision devices and thermal imaging equipment were used. Helicopters searched from above while boats searched waterways nearby. At one point, the search radius expanded to 3 miles around Sofia's neighborhood. Over the following days, more than 500 people became involved in the search effort. The Coast Guard searched rivers. Dive teams entered waterways. Cadaver dogs and scent dogs were deployed. City sewer systems were checked. Flyers with Sofia's photographs spread across Washington and beyond. And yet, nothing. No confirmed sightings, no physical evidence publicly identified. No trace of what happened to the little girl who simply walked out the front door trying to reach a convenience store. Cases involving children affect communities differently, especially when there are no answers. In Kennewick, people became consumed by Sofia's disappearance. A candlelight vigil was held 1 week later. Nearly 300 people marched from the Juarez home to St. Joseph's Catholic Church, carrying candles through the February cold. People prayed, people cried, people hoped. And one of the hardest parts of cases like this is the emotional whiplash families experience in those early days. At first, there's adrenaline. You believe someone will find the child any minute. You think maybe she wandered into a house. Maybe someone picked her up trying to help. Maybe she'll suddenly reappear. But as days pass, the silence becomes terrifying, and investigators began leaning heavily toward one conclusion. Sofia had likely been abducted. Over the years, investigators looked at countless possibilities. Family members were scrutinized. Friends were scrutinized. Known offenders were scrutinized. More than 150 sex offenders in and around Kennewick were investigated or researched for possible connections. Hundreds of tips poured in. In total, authorities would eventually examine more than 800 leads. Homes and vehicles were searched under warrants. Telephone records were analyzed. The FBI utilized major case management systems to organize information. And despite all of that effort, no arrests were ever made. At one point, police searched homes connected to a man named Jeremy Vargas Sagastuia. Their searches drew public attention, especially after relatives claimed police were pressuring them during questioning. But ultimately, no charges related to Sofia's disappearance came from those searches. Another man drew suspicion after making disturbing, sexually explicit comments about Sofia during a phone call with a stranger.
That's disgusting.
Disgusting. Police searched his residence as well. Eventually, investigators determined he was unrelated to Sofia's disappearance, though he was charged separately with telephone harassment.
Jesus.
And then there were the rumors. Theories spread constantly through the years. One persistent rumor claimed Sofia had been accidentally struck by people involved with drugs, then secretly removed from the scene and buried elsewhere. Investigators reportedly received more than 200 tips connected to variations of that theory. Different names, different vehicles, different alleged burial sites. But nothing ever conclusively tied any of those stories to Sofia. For many years, the public knew very little about possible suspects. Then, in 2021, investigators released one of the most unsettling developments in the entire case. A witness had apparently seen a Hispanic juvenile male, estimated to be between 11 and 14 years old at the time, interacting with Sofia shortly before she vanished. According to police, the witness described the boy leading Sofia toward a van while she cried. And somehow, the detail that he was reportedly laughing while she cried makes the entire image feel even darker
That's awful and creepy.
and super disturbing.
Yeah.
Police believe the boy and the van were connected to the abduction, but authorities have never publicly identified the individual. And that revelation opened another horrifying possibility. If the witness account is accurate, Sofia may not have been taken by an adult acting alone. Instead, another child or young teenager may have played a role in luring her away. One detail investigators repeatedly returned to was Sofia's personality. Her mother insisted Sofia was shy, not the kind of child who would willingly leave with a stranger. Maria believed Sofia would only have gone with someone she recognized or trusted. And that changes the emotional landscape of the case entirely. Because if that's true, then Sofia may have known the person who approached her. Or maybe she initially believed she was safe. Maybe she thought someone was helping her get to the store. Maybe someone used familiarity, friendliness, or another child to lower her guard. There are so many possibilities. And after 23 years, those unanswered possibilities become part of what makes the case so emotionally exhausting. Because investigators still cannot definitively answer one question. Did Sofia die that night? Or did she survive? One of the most surprising aspects of this case is that some investigators publicly stated they believed Sofia might still be alive.
I think a lot of people had that theory that she was still alive.
Mm-hmm.
Just maybe a kidnapping, and being that she was so young.
She's so young.
You know what I
4.
mean?
She's only 4.
It's one of those things where she could have been told a story and then lived her whole life.
And
You know
lived
what I
her
mean?
whole life. I mean, she's so young. Even someone could have approached her. Maybe they saw her crying like that and they were like, your mom died.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
you have to come with us. You like, your grandma's gone too. Like, she doesn't know. She's little.
And we've seen that tactic before.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, maybe someone just really wanted a kid. Like, as fucked up as that is and how to do it. I mean, there's some
How
really
many times have we
messed
seen
up
people
situations like that.
kidnap babies all the time,
Mhm.
unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. There's one story that haunts me to this day, that this woman gave birth to her child and she was with her sister-in-laws and they were leaving to get a taxi to go home. This was like back in the early 80s.
I think I know this one.
And they got carjacked in the parking lot and they stole the baby and they never found the baby.
Yep. Yeah.
Isn't that terrifying?
It's horrifying. There's also been lots of those ones of nurses kidnapping babies and things like that. It's just fucking awful.
It's horrible.
This is why I always struggle with children cases. It's just so awful.
It's devastating.
And they're so young.
So young and innocent. Innocent. In 2011, Detective Randy Maynard said his instinct was that Sofia was alive, explaining that if she had died shortly after the abduction, He believed her remains likely would have been found. Other investigators were more cautious. One detective later admitted that he had no evidence proving she was alive, but also no evidence proving she was dead. And when there's no body, no confession, and no physical resolution, a case can exist in this terrible emotional limbo forever. Over the years, age progressed images of Sophia were released repeatedly by National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. People compared faces constantly. Tips came in from across the country. At one point, investigators even looked into a teenager in California named Sofia Juarez after someone claimed she resembled the missing child. That lead went nowhere. Then, in 2021, another viral moment reignited hope. A TikTok video featuring a young woman who resembled Sophia's age progression spread rapidly online. Police investigated that lead too. Again, it was not Sophia.
They went as far as a DNA test.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's how close this girl did look a lot like her.
Right. The age progression and
Mhm.
her, they look so similar.
Exactly. I mean, you have to follow those up because you just never
You just never
know.
know for
You
sure.
never know. And in this digital age that we have where people have access to things like that, I mean, we see it all the time on TikTok, especially where people will go, do you think this person looks like so and so? And then it just starts going around and things like that. But it's well worth investigating
See that with like Madeline McCann all the time.
all the time. There's loads of people that I've seen
Mm-hmm.
that are like, this person could be, you know,
Mm-hmm. And every false lead creates another emotional rise and collapse for the people who still carry
her
this
poor
case with
family.
them. And this part's going to make you very sad too. There's another heartbreaking layer to this story that often gets overshadowed by the investigation itself. Sophia's mother never got answers. After years of living under the weight of her daughter's disappearance, Maria Juarez eventually moved to California. In 2008, she had another child. But according to a family member, she never stopped hoping Sophia would come home. Then, in January of 2009, Maria died from medical complications. She was only in her 20s.
That is just so sad.
Nearly 6 years after Sophia disappeared, her mother died without knowing what happened to her little girl. And after Maria's death, her funeral procession followed the exact same route as the candlelight vigil held for Sophia 6 years earlier. From East 15th Avenue to St. Joseph's Church. That image is devastating. A mother searching emotionally for her child until the very end of her own life.
It's just heartbreaking.
I cannot. Poor little baby.
I know. Well, I mean, we don't know, right? She could still be alive.
This is true. As of 2026, the disappearance of Sofia Juarez remains unsolved. Investigators continue reviewing leads. The case file reportedly exceeds 20,000 pages. DNA profiles remain in national databases, and Kennewick police still publicly state they believe somebody knows what happened. In 2021, authorities launched renewed investigative efforts and created a dedicated website focused entirely on Sophia's case. Even after all these years, her photograph still appears at fairs, on awareness campaigns, on billboards, and even on semi-trucks traveling across the Pacific Northwest. Because people in Kennewick never will fully let her go. And maybe part of that is because of how quickly she disappeared. One moment, she was inside a crowded family home preparing for her birthday. Minutes later, she was gone. No screams, anyone remembering hearing anything, No confirmed abductor seen clearly. No explanation. Just a 4-year-old little girl trying to follow someone to the store. And then darkness. There's something especially painful about cases frozen in time. Sophia wasn't running away. She wasn't in danger in the way adults usually imagine danger. She was simply trying to catch up. That's it. A child following behind someone she trusted on what should have been one of the happiest nights of her year. And somehow, in the span of only a few blocks, she vanished from the world. Today, Sofia Juarez would be an adult woman in her late 20s. She may look completely different now. She may not even know who she is. Or somewhere, somebody may still be carrying the secret of what happened on that cold February night in 2003. Either way, Sophia deserves an answer. And after more than 2 decades, the people who love her still deserve the truth. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Sofia Juarez, authorities continue to encourage tips through the Kennewick Police Department or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. My sources were Wikipedia, Como 4, King 5, Seattle Times, Tri-City Herald, Seattle PI, CNN, Yakima Herald, and the Kennewick Police Department interviews.
And we will post on our Instagram page the age progressed photos as well, just so that you know. That is a really, really sad case. And all I can do is hold out some hope that maybe someone did kidnap her and raise her and that she's living somewhere just unaware of everything. And hopefully at some point she's going to see a picture or something or from a podcast or
Anything.
an article or something.
And be like, hey, that kind of looks like me.
Exactly, and then look into it. You just never know. I mean, we've
You
had a
never know.
string of women lately, especially, that have been found later in life. There was a woman just the other day that was found 40 years later. So it's
Yeah.
just kind of crazy that, there are people that were kidnapped young and, they are found. So I'm hoping for her family. I mean, awful, so fucking sad about her mom.
I mean, I have to say, like, I'm never going to parent shame or whatever, but I mean, she was 4 fucking years old. I understand
Kids
that
can
they
get
were
away really fast, though. You know what I
I
mean?
know, but I mean, I
Trust
I j
me.
it's
They
just
can be
like,
really fast or
I
sneaky.
I
You
know,
just
but
never know.
I mean, she did know. She knew she was leaving. I just would have wanted to see my eyes connect with
Yeah.
her basically grandpa, like I would
Yeah.
just want for my sanity to see her connect with him. When she was
Sure.
4 years old.
Yeah. But
I'm
also you
crazy.
would
A
you might trust.
helicopter.
Sure. But you might trust the scenario, right? I mean, I don't think that any blame can be placed on her mom in
No,
that
I'm not
way.
trying to blame or parent shame. I'm just please, like a 4-year-old, like I mean, that is just so heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking. And, all we can do is hold out hope for her family that if anything, that they get answers, whether it's good news or bad news, some resolution, because these kind of cases sit with you and they stick
Forever.
with you and you want to know definitively one way or another, at least so that they can, you know, have a funeral or they can celebrate a return. You just never know. And like I said, we will be posting about this on our Instagram page, so do check that out in case you never know. She might be living your next door
Maybe you're
neighbor.
Sophia. Maybe you're Sophia.
Maybe you are. Who knows? If you don't know your full backstory or just look at the pictures,
Yeah, look at the picture.
you just never know. You know
You
what I'm
might,
saying?
if you love gold hoop earrings and you have a mole under your eye, maybe you're Sophia.
Perhaps. Who knows? Who knows? So do check that out. We will be back next week New episodes always come out on Mondays, and we will be back again bringing you 2 brand new cases. And just want to say thank you for listening. We appreciate you all so much. And yeah, we'll be back again next week. Bye.
Bye.